Um, Again, my name is Christopher Zarr. I'm an education specialist for the National Archives. So excited to be with you to share a little bit about the National Archives, especially our online tool, docsteach.org. Um, I know you had a session recently with one of my colleagues looking at political cartoons. I don't know how much you know about the archives yet. I don't know how much you went into things, really. So I'm going to give you a little background into what the archives is. But since we only have an hour, I want to make sure to devote enough time to showing off our online resource for teachers, docsteach.org. Show you how to search around, how to find materials, show you how some of the activities work, hopefully quickly walk you through making an activity as well. So it's a jam-packed hour. I know we're going to follow up, I think, in about a month or so. So we'll have time to kind of work in between and get a sense of it. But let's get right to it because time is rushing by. Okay, so if you don't know what the National Archives is, we are a federal government agency. We're the nation's record keeper. It's our mission to preserve and provide access to the records of the federal government, whether it's the different federal executive agencies, whether it's Congress, the Supreme Court, and the lower courts. It's our mission to preserve and provide access to all of those documents. And we have in our collection, even though we are not that old of an agency, we were established in the 1930s. We have in our collection things that date back to the very founding of our country. We have the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights in our collection. Now, the archives wasn't started until the 1930s. There was a time when basically every agency was in charge of doing their own thing and holding on to the documents in whatever way they saw fit. There were some fires, things were lost, not great record keeping practices like this. These are War Department records in the White House garage before the archives got started. And if you look close, you can see there is a tire there. So there was a push in the 1920s and 30s to set up an agency, one agency that was in charge of holding on materials for the entire federal government. And not everything the federal government creates or receives in a given year ends up in the National Archives. It's about 2 to 3% that is decided to be permanently valuable. That small 2 to 3% has grown throughout the past almost 100 years to over 15 billion pages of text, 18 million maps, drawings, and charts, millions of images, billions of electronic records, which is the fastest growing category. We also have miles and miles of film and video, hundreds of thousands of artifacts, mainly in the presidential library system that's part of the archives. Just a huge amount of material stored all around the country. There are over 40 locations for the National Archives. I work in the New York City office, but there are offices up in Boston. Headquarters is in DC area and in College Park, Maryland. There are offices throughout Texas, California, all the way to Seattle, each place having different documents. Most of the federal records for you guys in Kentucky, I think, would be in the National Archives at Atlanta, which has most of like the southeast, part of the country. But there probably is a closer National Archives to you guys in Illinois or Michigan or Ohio, not super duper far away, but and again, the presidential library system is part of the archives as well from Herbert Hoover forward. Just to give a sense of what these places might look like, you have our DC office, College Park, Maryland office, some presidential libraries as well. Recently, the archives has been leasing underground limestone quarries in the Missouri area where a lot of records are kept. There's a whole area there called Subtropolis where millions and millions of documents are preserved. And this is where I typically work at the National Archives in New York City in Lower Manhattan, though I will admit I've only been there a handful of times in the last few years. Every time it seems like we're about to go back in, the numbers just spike up again. New York just entered medium again. So I'm already getting ready to start transitioning back into the office, and then it'll probably go away again. Now, some of the really big documents that are in our collection are things like the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, which we have the original copies in Washington, D.C. But there are literally billions of documents, famous court cases, um, petitions sent into Congress, laws that were passed, the different aspects of the federal government doing its work. It's our mission to hold on to all of those different documents. Now, the main way we support education and support teachers is through our National Archives education team. And the main product that we use to do that is a resource, docsteach.org, which I'm going to share in just a minute. But we do have a bunch of other resources on our website. I'll even just move over so you guys can see archives.gov. Front and center is educator resources. You can link out there to find out about our civic initiative. You can click into DocsTeach as well. If you want to find out about distance learning options that we provide teachers, all of this is kind of a portal page to all the different things that the archives does for education. There's even information about our document analysis worksheets, a list of milestone documents, used to be called the Our Documents Project, and then things about professional development, student visits, etc., all on archives.gov/education. But the big product that the archives has for teachers is docsteach.org. And this is where we're going to spend the rest of our time and hopefully give you guys a chance to search around and find materials as well. So this is a website that Archives has launched about 10 years ago. We've updated a few times along the way. It's a place where you can find primary source documents from the archives. It's a place you can find activities that we and other teachers all across the country have created. And it's also a place where you can modify or create your own activities using primary source documents. So it's kind of threefold that way. I'm gonna give you guys, I'm gonna show the document side of the website first and give everyone a chance to search around to see what you might find. So if you click on Explore Primary Sources or menu Documents, it brings up our Documents search page. And right now there are over 13,000 primary sources that are available in DocsTeach, 13,004. We are always adding more to it. We recently added, because a colleague of mine was doing a presentation for a conference about the Holocaust. We recently added hundreds of primary source documents about the Holocaust to it, but on a wide array of different topics. If you wanted to see, just what things we had for a particular time period, you can, even without even typing in a search term, you can see that there's almost 1,000 documents related to the Civil War and Reconstruction. If you want to just look at photos, you see there's 340 photos for that time period. But obviously, you're going to want to type in a search term of some sort. Get a huge number. You can then use those filters to modify your results, get it down to something more manageable. Ooh, I got to sneeze. And then if you click on one of those documents, you will see the document title, the year. If there's an official caption the photographer gave it, it'll be here, or sometimes there'll be some background information, and then a full citation for that particular document, who created it, where it physically exists, even a link out here to the National Archives catalog if you wanted to find out more. We try to put the best quality version of the image in DocsTeach, and as soon as things get like rescanned, sometimes we'll update images here as well. If you wanted to print it out or download it, pretty easy, straight from these little icons right above the image. These two icons are grayed out right now because I'm not logged into my account, but this is a free resource. If you register and basically choose a username, an email address, and a password. Then you can start creating your own collections, creating your own activities using DocsTeach. So I'm going to log into my account real quick. And now the plus and the star are available. So if I hit plus, I can add this document to an activity that I'm making. Or if I hit star, I can add it to a folder about a particular topic. So I have a bunch of folders. So I'm going to add this to my immigration documents folder and click add. If I didn't have a title, you can kind of give it a blank title and you can change it later. And now that document lives under your in your folder. If you click on menu, my account, my documents, you can see all the different folders you've created. If I go down here, let's see, here is a folder of immigration documents. You can see I add that one today, January 24th, 2023. It's also in there from a little over a year ago. So I made a mistake. I'll remove that folder. So remove that from the folder. Let me go back down. And if I want to rename the folder something else, I could do that. And it generates a link, which you could then share with your students, share with your colleagues, share with your supervisors. If you're sharing with your students or whoever you share it with, they will not need an account to be able to access this little folder you've put aside for them. And you can very quickly kind of set up like almost like a virtual gallery walk of different documents about a particular topic. Or for your own purposes, you're kind of keeping track of different things that you're finding that maybe you want to use in an activity down the road. So again, it's fairly straightforward to search. I'm going to give you guys a chance to search as well. You can search for a very specific, a very broad term like civil rights. You could search for a particular person. You keep on trying to tag things so that they show up, because sometimes the historic documents have a different title than what teachers are really looking for. So we're always tagging to improve searching. But if you find a document that you're interested in, again, you can see the information about it. You can see the citation for it. You can print it. You can download it. You can add it to an activity or add it to a folder. Okay, so that's the main way people use DocsTeach is just to find and search for different primary source documents, see what is out there, and maybe they then put it in a PowerPoint, put it in some other type of resource. But I want to give everyone a chance to search around, and maybe as well, if you're interested in making an account, give you guys a chance to do that too. So I want to give like maybe 7 minutes or so just to search around on the website, see what's available, see what you find, and if in that 7 minutes or so you want to create an account, you should get an email sent to you for that account. So you should check your email box to click on a link and verify it. And if you have any trouble, if you're not getting the email or something wrong with making your account, you could drop something in the chat and I'll look on the back end, see if I can fix it for you. But just take like the next 7 minutes or so. We'll come back together. My clock says 4:15 at 4:22, and we'll see what we found. Okay, sound good?
Yes. So Chris, they just need to go to docsteach.org and then register and move forward from there.
Sounds great. Yeah, docsteach.org. And if you want to, you can register or you can just search around. You can say register for later. And for registering.
Any questions, jump in or type in the chat. We'll be right here. So next 7 minutes. So you all are in search of. So
and then we'll come back and share what we found, even what we didn't find. We're always trying to add to this resource, so it's good to know where our gaps are.
Fantastic.
Give like another minute or so, then we'll start coming back. Okay, I can see some comments in the chat. If you want to share something that you found in the chat, if you want to put the link in the chat, or just type it, or if you want to unmute yourself and share, whatever you're comfortable with. So to hear a little bit about what you guys found.
Hello. My name
Hello.
is Susan. I really like the activities section. When you click the menus and you go to the activities. And I clicked on the revolution and the new nation. And I really liked how it had different activities you could do. And then also it had where you could have all the documents or anything, resources that goes with it. It has right there, and it goes step by step of that activity.
How to do it. Yes, and I'm gonna walk through a couple of the different activity types. There's like 11 different types. I'll show one a more basic activity, one that might be good for like an opening or a closure of a lesson, and one that might be like an entire lesson in just a couple moments. That's so good to hear. Thank you. Anybody else want to share?
I also was looking at the activities. Right now we're doing a unit on the American Revolution, and there was an activity comparing and contrasting the Boston Massacre. And I thought it was really interesting that the colonists called it a bloody massacre, and the English called it an unhappy disturbance. And it had various pictures, depicting it, and it had them looking at and analyzing those photographs and coming up with their own thoughts on who, was it the colonists that painted this, or was it British? And I thought that was really interesting because they're really fascinated in that. And I think they would enjoy that activity.
Yeah, when you look at and that probably uses the compare and contrast tool, but whether it's that or one of the other ones, and you can kind of see different versions of the same event, or at least different perspectives on the same event. I think it makes history fun, or at least it complicates things, but it's the kids like to see like, oh, it's not just in the book, it's all these different things.
Right, because we really focus on it being, the massacre, but it's really just through the eyes of the colonists. So I liked how it did a spin of, the English called it an unhappy disturbance. And I think they would enjoy thinking about it in the eyes of the British instead of just the colonists.
Right. Yeah. It kind of, when you hear that language, it kind of puts you there, lets you know how people are discussing it, and lets you know that like the past at one point was the present, and people had different opinions about all the stuff, just like we do today. I think kids kind of forget that sometimes. Okay, anybody find any, I could be talking about activities. We're gonna look at activities in a second. Anybody find any documents on the document side, anything that they want to share? Something for a topic that's coming up soon, or maybe you searched for something and didn't find what you were looking for?
I found one on, we're getting ready to do the Western expansion.
Oh, okay.
And we're doing the Trail of Tears. And, I found a document that was saying that it was the petition against the new I can't say, I'm not sure what the word is.
I'm not sure either.
Treaty.
Yeah.
And it said that, the treaty, them moving the Cherokee was not, the claim wasn't valid because the chieftain didn't sign off on it and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I did find that one.
Yeah. The treaties, Native American treaties, or treaties in general, are super interesting documents. We have obviously a lot of them. And some of them those are pretty much all in English. We have some which the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo has like the English column and the Spanish column side by side. It's just kind of interesting to see these exchange documents and like how they work. Even if students aren't going to be expected to read every single language of a treaty, just to see those documents can be super eye-opening to students. Any other documents people want to share?
I found some, not necessarily documents, but images.
Okay.
My kids are studying right now, past and present.
Oh, sure.
And learning how to add ed and ing and all that kind of stuff. And one of the
Right.
things in Reading Wonders is looking at schools and how they are different
Oh, yeah.
today as opposed to back then. So they're
course.
learning Venn diagram right now. So I found a bunch of pictures of school back then so they could, tomorrow before we start, we could look at some of these images and that might add to what they've already learned about what it was like.
Right. Yeah. No, that's you know, if you're introducing, I'm assuming it's elementary grade or earlier, or what grade is
Yes,
this?
it's first grade.
I was gonna say it sounded like first grade or kindergarten. And you know, that's kind of the same thing they do up here in New Jersey and in New York City in those grades, comparing the past and the present. And school is something that kids know, and you know, people don't think primary sources, or I said document. Document to me means like broad. It could be a map, it could be a photo, it could be a drawing. But people don't think of photos or images even, and asking students what they observe and stuff in it. But if you can include these types of sources early on, first grade, kindergarten, etc., then later on when they're looking at more complicated text, it's super, super helpful. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, maybe one more if anybody has something. Everybody want to share something that they searched for but couldn't find?
You've got a couple comments in the chat there.
Oh,
One,
okay, yeah.
yeah, Marlena. I don't know if you can see those or not.
Yeah, I can
she-
see, yeah.
Okay, got it. All right.
On the school lunches, that's what people intrigue them. Oh yeah, definitely. And whenever there's images of kids doing stuff, I always try to add them in, thinking of especially elementary level kids looking at different images, because it could be super eye-opening and a bridge to doing that type of analysis. So again, we're always adding to this resource. We're always trying to make it more inclusive and touch on different topics that we know teachers and their students are looking at. Anybody have any final things for this part before we move on? Okay, so that's kind of one side of the website that some people already took a sneak peek at the activity side. I'll admit, probably, you know, if you look at the usage of the site, like 3/4 or so of the people who come to DocsTeach use it as a resource to find primary source documents, and don't dive too deep into the activity side of the website. Part of it is, you know, these are 13,000 documents. It's kind of more manageable. When I started working at the archives in 2008, we had about 1 million documents in the National Archives catalog digitized. Now we just passed 200 million documents. So if you search for any topic there, it could be crazy overwhelming, even for a person who's, you know, worked for the archives, you know, coming up on 15 years. So when we find things, we hear things are digitized. When a huge collection of like 10,000 photographs gets added to the catalog, we have staff members, we have volunteers, interns, we even have teachers. We're doing a project right now with some Oklahoma teachers who will find things in the catalog that will then end up in DocsTeach. Some will kind of add them to this particular resource. To make it, you know, it is, the catalog is way too hard for most people, especially students, and to some degree, you know, teachers as well, to search through. So we want to make this a resource that's a little bit more manageable. But the other side of the website is the activity side. Right now, there's about 2,000 activities that teachers have created, 2013 results. There's a handful more than that as well, because sometimes teachers will create an activity and then maybe publish it and then unpublish it after they share it with their students. We've created about 200 activities to be exemplars to kind of let people know what that particular style of activity is like. And the activities themselves come in a variety of different formats. Let me actually show that first before showing how to search and find activities. So we have some templates that are pretty basic. If you want to have your students look at one primary source and really just get a sense of how to analyze it or have a discussion question about it. All these ones that are under the subject of focusing on the details and this analyzing documents one are pretty easy activities. I heard someone say before the spotlight one is helpful because you kind of could take a primary source document and then show only ask your students to focus on a particular detail of it. Bobby, I'm going to show in a second in the when we look at searching, you can filter by grade level. We kind of just right now have things filtered as like lower elementary, upper elementary, middle school, high school. But I would say if you're searching for something to kind of, if you're searching for middle school, look at upper elementary too. You might find a decent activity there. But back to here. So these are pretty basic activities. I like the ones zoom crop and whiteout blackout are probably some of my favorites for these because you could take a primary source and just like obscure a certain little bit of information and then ask your students to see if they could figure out what the entire document is about. It kind of turns it into like a quest to find out more information. The analyzing documents one, if you haven't introduced a particular type of source to your students before, a photograph, a chart, a map, then this might be a helpful tool for that. We have questions that are more appropriate for high school level students, some that are better for English language learners and younger students as well. So we try to be be mindful of those differences. And then we have activities. This starts here with finding a sequence and on, where they're really set up to be kind of big activities where you want your students to see how a process or historical event unfolded over time, to see how different documents might be related to each other. That's making connections. Mapping history, seeing how events took place around the country or around the world. Seeing the big picture is one where you can match documents to descriptions or match documents to documents. And there's some activities in that which are kind of appropriate for K2 level all the way up to AP history, depending on how it's written. And then we have weighing the evidence, which is great for if you are doing an argument writing and you want your students to look at the multiple sides of a particular issue. And then interpreting data is one if you have a chart, a graph, and you really want them to really dive in deep within it. So these are the different styles of activities. So when you're searching on the activity side, again, you could filter by era pretty easily, even without picking a topic. You could filter by grade level, lower, upper, middle, high school, university. And you'll get, a bunch of materials about the American Revolution that are appropriate for middle school age. I will say again, it makes sense to also look at upper elementary to know what other teachers are really doing. And then if you take one of these documents, here is maybe the one we were talking about before. This is the teacher page. It lets you know a little bit about the activity, how much time it should take, what grades we think it's most appropriate for, and then like step by step how to do the activity. This is one that we've made. So whenever we create an activity, we really try to make it like you could do it the next day without too much more support for it. And then, this is the teacher page. As a student, if your students have different devices and they were doing this activity in small groups or individually, you can just share this link with them. Or some of the activities work well if you just have, a projector and a screen and you're kind of walking your students through the different activities. So this one is the Boston Massacre one, and it tells you to choose one of the first three created decades later, and analyze the artwork using the questions below, and just really think about what do you see, what do you think is happening. So these are 3 depictions that are, I think, mainly from the 1800s. And then you have one from Paul Revere, which was contemporaneous, though, contemporaneous, not necessarily being more accurate. And then there are some additional questions. So your students would kind of go through this, either you're presenting it or on their own devices. After they completed it, there is a final question here that tells them to compare it to that 4th image, and then to consider bias. How do you think colonists reacted to this image? And do you think Paul Revere's depiction qualifies as propaganda? They can put in their name, your email address, and to send you a response directly. And you would get it in your email if you have an account. If your school uses Google Classroom, you can actually assign this activity by clicking on this Google Classroom icon, and then they can turn it in doing that same thing. If you're using a different learning management system, you can assign it using this link, and the same thing, they can turn in their results with the link as well. For this one, you really only get a page with what their answer is to that question. So if you're using, some other platform and you just want them to answer the questions there, it works pretty well that way as well. But again, this is the student page. Here is the teacher page, which kind of lets you know that, ask students what the word massacre means, ask them to read the word silently and write down any thoughts that come to mind. So we really try to, it's not a true lesson plan, but it's kind of a series of educational activities wrapped around this document analysis question. This is an activity that I created. It's actually adapted from a New York City Department of Ed resource that I worked on as well. So I was kind of adapting a resource that I worked on in some way about the Boston Massacre that we did early on in the pandemic when they were doing a lot of virtual stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna go back out here. I'm gonna give you guys a chance to do an activity sort of from the perspective of your students. But I'm going to stop my share for a second because I need to find the activity. I don't want you to see what it is.
Great comments, everybody, and appreciate everybody participating today. And Chris, this is wonderful. So very.
I'm going to drop the link in the chat to the student side. I'll share my screen again so we can all see it. But this uses one of the other tools, the Analyzing Documents tool. And if you've ever used the document analysis forums that the Archives has created, we've had them for decades. I used them when I was in the classroom. This is like a digital version of it. So as a student, you would see what is the highly secret matter. And then it just says, take a minute to examine this document and answer the questions that follow. And you can zoom in to read this particular document, look closely at some of the details. You're trying to figure out what it is. And then there are some questions below that you can fill in. So I just want to give you like 5 minutes or so just to see this. Again, this is a particular activity using this tool. If you were teaching this topic, you could just give this to your students directly. If you wanted to tweak it and add a different question to it, you can do that as well. Or this is just a template. You could put any primary source document into it and ask these types of questions about it. Okay, so if this is not grade appropriate or topic appropriate for what you're teaching, you can include the questions, the types of questions about a wide array of different topics. So take like 3 or 4 minutes to just see how this looks. And then we'll share out. Okay, I'm just gonna put myself on mute and get a drink of water for a sec.
Okay, Marlena, since you're on your phone, you may not be able to see that unless you may have to scroll over across if you're I don't know if that'll work or not. The other day when I was on my phone, I had to flip through multiple screens to see everybody. Probably not a help, but Great. Glad you see it, Marlena. Thank you.
Hey, Jim, I can't hear anything. Should I be hearing something right now?
I can't either.
Oh, sorry. I was talking a little bit. I just started talking. You guys hear me?
Yeah, we do now. Yeah.
Now we
Okay,
can.
sorry.
I saw your mouse moving around, but I didn't know if you were kind of giving us a
Yeah, I
little
was
more
starting
time
to
to
do it.
explore.
I just started like
Oh.
a minute ago. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, no worries. So is there anything on this particular document, even if they couldn't, we don't expect they'll be able to really understand 100% without the context what this document is about. But they could definitely probably pick up some clues. So what's something on this document that might be a clue to help them figure out what this document is about? Maybe want to share? Definitely. Marlena says the dates. So we have dates written here and here as well. What else?
War Department.
Yeah, they got War Department here at the top. We have Secretary of War at the bottom. Anything else? Who the letter is written to? We do have Dear Mr. President. It doesn't say the president's name, but with the dates and maybe here with this abbreviation, you can figure out who it is. It's Harry S. Truman. Any other details?
It's got foreign relations written on it, underlined.
Yeah, so you have foreign relations underlined here. There's some other codes which are kind of hard to figure out. I mean, and other details.
The fact it
File
had to be
here.
disclassified.
Right. So you have secret crossed out the top and bottom as declassified, not for decades after in 1976. So there's a secret information. Anybody
No,
can
it's
tell?
gotta be, no, it's gotta be a pretty big deal because he says put on list for tomorrow.
Right. So it's not like, we'll talk about it next week. No big deal. Does anybody want to take a guess what this is about?
The bomb.
The big one. Yeah, this is about the Manhattan Project. So, literally, this is from Henry Stimson, who was Secretary of War, to President Truman. He's telling them that everything I've been thinking about with foreign relations relates to this particular item that he had mentioned to him about it briefly. This is, Truman had become president after FDR passed away. But lets you know that Truman was pretty much in the dark for his entire time as vice president, which wasn't that long. But even up to this point, didn't really know the full extent about the Manhattan Project. Something that he'll use these two bombs within. One will be tested and two will be used within just a couple months. So we don't expect students would be able to do this entire thing and be able to understand that this is what this was about. Obviously, our historical context is super helpful. But this is a process. It kind of walks them through, what details they should look at, that it's a letter, that it's has signatures and notes on it, that you can read who it's from and when it's from. And if you liked this particular activity, you can share this directly with your students, or it's just really a template where you could put in specific questions. Okay, so I want to briefly show one of the longer activities, just to give you a sense of how that works. And then I'm going to very quickly give you a sense of how to make an activity. Which one do I want to do? I'll do this one. So this is an activity that uses the weighing the evidence tool. So the way this tool works, you have two interpretations. In this case, the question is how have Americans responded to immigration? There's two interpretations. And then there's an array of different primary source documents along the bottom. And for this one, students would click on this little orange button to get a little closer to the document. In this case, it's like a broadside advertising that, yes, people who want to become US citizens, we have textbooks that will teach you about our government and our language. So students would find that, and based on their interpretation, they can place it on this scale. Depending where they place it, it causes the scale to lean one way or the other. This one, there's like the matching one and the sequencing one. There's like a right answer or a wrong answer, and if students don't make the right match or put it in the right order, it doesn't work. But this one, there's probably room for where some students might think it belongs here or it belongs here. And then students might find a document like this poster from World War I, talking about you should buy government war bonds. That's like not really giving a sense of what people think about immigration. So they might put that one in the center. And then this one is a flyer about boycotting any Chinese or Japanese restaurants or owned businesses. So clearly this is on the other side of the issue. And they might go one or two higher. Obviously, they could do this as well and just put things in random places, but then they wouldn't be able to answer the final question. And just like before, they can put in their name, your email address, and send you a response. And in your response, you'll literally get what they wrote in this box, but also you'll see where they placed each of these different documents. So if you were teaching this topic, you could use it. If it was close to what you wanted to do, you could modify this activity, take some documents out of it, put some new documents into the activity, or it's just a template where you can do what you want with it. So let me show you briefly how to modify an activity. So let's say you like this one and you wanted to make your own version of it. I'm going to put this in my default classroom, because you can, just like with making a folder for documents, you can do that for activities as well. Okay, and now in my default one, I should see. Here it is, how Americans responded to immigration. That original activity is there. Whatever you do here won't change it. But, and you can see, if I go to here to add elements, you can see that all those documents are in it. But maybe you have a different document that you want to include in that activity. So you could actually add a new document to it from the National Archives collection, or, and I haven't mentioned this before, if you have an image, maybe something from another resource or something in a personal collection, as long as it's not in under copyright, you have permission to use it, you can upload an image up to a certain size. There'll be a little note below it that says it's not from the archives, but you can include things from other places within these resources. But maybe you found a great map that you wanted to include. So you're searching, you found a great map. This is an immigration into the US map between 1820 and 1924. I definitely want to include this in this activity, my version of it. So I'm going to hit the plus sign now, and I'm going to say, add this to this activity. I'm going to return here now. And you will see that that map I added is included in this activity. Now, maybe for whatever reason, these three documents were not grade appropriate for my students. I can remove them. Maybe you have less time to do this activity and you want to make it a little bit more focused. You can remove documents, you can add documents, and you just kind of go here step by step. The next step is the setup step. For this one, you can change the interpretations. So maybe you have a new interpretation you want students to think about, or a new question of some sort, kind of tweaking it to make it make sense for your students. I'm gonna hit save. And then since this is an activity where we're modifying, a lot of these tabs are already kind of filled in. If you were making an activity from scratch, they'd all be blank and you'd have to include information. Maybe you have a better conclusion question. Hit save. Go on to the next tab. I'm going to want to view it in a second. The only thing when you modify an activity, it kind of blanks out the instructions. You can always cut and paste them back in, but it does ask you if you're making your own version, you probably should tweak what the details are. So maybe you've changed it. Now it's a, the original activity was a high school activity. Now you've made it a middle school activity. You give a short summary for teachers, some step-by-step details. I'm going to hit save. Right now, only I can see this activity because it's under my name, but if I clicked on publish, it would be out there. You could share it with your students or other people can see it as well. But before I publish it, it's always good to view it, see how it looks. I would probably change the title so it didn't have copy in it, but you can see now you have a new question of some sort, my new interpretation, and my better conclusion question. So you have this, activity that somebody else made, the archives made, and you've tweaked it, you've added a new document into it, you took some documents out of it, and you made it your own for your students. It didn't take too long to do that. And I'd actually recommend if you want to start getting, we're going to meet again in a month or so. If you want to start kind of thinking about how to use DocsTeach for activities, find an activity that you like and maybe tweak it a little bit, change a question here or there so it makes more sense for your students. If you want to create an activity from scratch, I'd pick one of these, I'd pick one of these more basic activities that only use one primary source and see if they can see if you can kind of make that to get a sense of how those different steps work along the way. To make one of these bigger activities right out of the gate could be complicated. There's a lot of, knowing what's out there and what kind of things you want in it. So it's good to get your feet wet by working with these different activity types or modifying your own. So that's the hour-long intro to DocsTeach and a little about the archives. Sorry, I was on mute for a minute or so showing you guys stuff. I thought you guys were being much quieter than I knew you would be. But I'm so glad that I had time to share this resource with all of you. And I'm really excited to find out what you might create and use with the site. I'm so glad we get to check in again in another month or so to see what you guys thought about it. But I know I am free now as well. So if you have any questions about anything I shared with DocsTeach or the archives, I'm in my dining room, so I really have nowhere to go.
So thank you so much, Chris, and always hit save. I'm sure at the end of each entry you make there, always at the bottom, always hit save before you so.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
that's the big, I would say every step along the way, hit save just to make sure that you don't lose anything.
As Chris said, we'll be on here as long as you need. If you have questions, I posted the evaluation in the chat, and then there, like I say, thank you so much. And I've taken some notes here of follow-up and things like that. So we very much appreciate your attendance as always. Tweet, I'll retweet like crazy after a while. So you all push some things out on Twitter. We love showcasing you and your work. So, and all you do in your classes every single day and what you do in your district. So again, if you've got questions for Chris, ask away or in the chat, or if you need something KEDC or Grants World, I'll stay on as long as you need me to be. So glad to help in any way. So, and I appreciate you bearing with me tonight. I know you all love having Wendy on, and I do as well. But again, she was on the other cadre. So I'm going to stop recording now, and you all complete that evaluation so we can give you credit.
Now, Jim, you know we're glad to see you too, always.
I appreciate that, Susan. Thank you. That's on recording, so I've got it. It's archived.